We provide furniture. So she calls us as a resource. And as soon as she found out that we utilize churches as a resource to help, she got livid.
Yeah.
And her words were, why would you allow churches to help a person like me? Probably another 45 minutes into that conversation, she goes, because of your care and your treatment of me, I will allow you to pray for me.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
You want to get us rolling, Pete?
Sure. So, we just love to kind of catch up and hear what's going on and what you guys are up to with your ministry and family and all that kind of stuff. You've both been in the Portland area for a long time. You've been in the upper left for a long time. We got to clarify upper left every time because we're getting so many questions about it. But, just the upper left of the country, Washington, Oregon. You've been around for a while. And so just share with us how you got to where you are now.
After you.
Where I am now. I actually drove here.
You didn't fly?
No, I wish I could. Actually, I don't know, it'd be kind of crazy. But so I have it's been a cool kind of story for myself and my family. We came up here a bit ago to teach, at a school, and then things kind of changed from there. The Lord had things different in mind and got connected to Love Inc. Through actually you, Pete. Like we're.
You're welcome.
It was a beautiful. It was totally how Love Inc. should be. It's a neighborhood gathering. Folks out on the street for July 4th, doing the barbecue and all that kind of stuff. And I'd been sitting, waiting on the Lord for where He wanted us next, and in talking with Pete and about the needs of just this area, East Multnomah County, and where the Lord had us, and began praying about that. And so it's been a wonderful spiritual journey for my family and I since January. Asking the Lord, what is it that you have in store for us and the church? Because that's basically my background is the studies that I've always done have been, church focused as far as like my salvation plays out through the church. And so that's why I went for my studies. Yeah. And so my wife and I had been praying since January, okay, Lord, what is it that you want us to be doing with our church, with the church? And it came about with this opportunity that Love Inc., East Multnomah County, had been in the development process and going through the stages to become a verified, Love Inc. for National Love Inc. And the Lord brought it together. And so I started November 1st as the first executive director of Love Inc., East Multnomah County, which is super.
Was that exciting to you, having it be like brand new and everything?
It's actually it's funny because this summer my son did woodland firefighting, and we joked about it because he said, Dad, this is like the perfect job because it's like everything in my life is coming together where it's like studies and strategy and thinking and physical and and we were talking about that, and your question, he asked me about this, and I said, it's the same thing. It's like I always thought that maybe I'd be a professor or a pastor, and I got to do both. And then this came about, and when the things happened with the school that I was teaching at and we got let go, I thought, okay, Lord, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And yet then when I started talking with you and I talked to the chairwoman for the board of Love Inc., I started to get it was like that excitement where you walk around. I was telling Stuart, I was working 2 days ago until 11 at night, and it was just a joy though. It wasn't work. You know what I'm saying? It's when people say, what do you do? I get to tell them, I actually get to live out my faith. It's the coolest thing. And that's what I love about Love Inc. is that for me, the goal is Jesus. It's unashamedly. And I love that. The main point that they really want to make sure that people know is what we do is in the name of Christ. And so for me, the excitement just kept building. And so waiting for this to come about was kind of the hardest thing because I was so excited about the possibility of doing this. That I was like, wait, all of the things that the Lord has been bringing us through the 20 plus years of growing in our faith, my wife and I and our kids, and the reality is it's because it is Christ-centered and it's Spirit-led. And so for me, that is the pinnacle of anything that I could do. And so, it's been a gift. And so the excitement has just been oh my gosh, I can't believe but I can because God is that great. And it's happening now too during the Christmas season with Advent and everything. And I'm like, when we stop to think about the miraculous things that are just so normal for God, this is it for me. I'm like, this is the case. And how can I not want to then step into the community and just share the love of Christ? And so for me, it has been the neatest thing. I don't know about you, but like, this is the thing is like being an executive director for an organization that wants nothing more than people to understand the love that pours out from Jesus Christ. I'm like, this is great.
And
this
in these times when they're vulnerable, when they might be struggling, when they
Totally.
And it's been building in so many ways, like for years and years. Of like, I feel like a lot of the things we've been praying for 8 years are coming to fruition now with just people. The church is coming together, like the board that you have, representative of other great local churches, and it's I'm really, really excited for Rockwood, for East Multnomah County, because there are huge opportunities.
Yeah, and it's cool to step in a time where you go, wait, a lot of people have been talking about this. You know, sometimes we get too Christianese and too cliche about the movement, the spirit. But really, when you sit down and you start talking about to people in this area right here, for sure. I mean, Portland, you know, is spread out, but there is a feeling, there is a movement. And we've talked about it back in the day when you were an undergrad and I was at Multnomah, would talk about like how Portland is just it is an interesting area to come do ministry. And we would talk when I was teaching or a student at Multnomah taking seminary classes, like it is the living laboratory for church leaders, because there's something unique about the upper left, right? The Northwest is just so, it is unique. It is very, and that's why you can have shows like Portlandia and people go, that makes sense. Well, the church culture is like that too. When people do ministry in Portland, you start to go, wow, you get your badge of, perseverance, you know, and so it's been cool. And for me, I like it. I mean, it really feeds into the core of who God, I believe, has created each one of us. Yeah. So I would imagine your same thing too. Like when we've talked, like when I met with him, is like, wait, he's as excited as I am. And it's like, you could talk for hours just going, oh my, with this. And so that's why I keep asking, well, what about this? And what do you do with this? And well, how about this? And he's like, it'll come.
Yeah.
Settle down.
That the Australian pastor, Mark Sayers, you know, he was here a couple months ago and he said like there's no place I would rather be for doing ministry in the world than like Portland, Melbourne, you know, some of these cities. Yeah. That there's just things bubbling up. And I feel like a lot of our work is maybe I don't know if you would call it like pre-discipleship or it's basically like people that thought they would never go to church, or they would never or Christians are all this way, to be like, well, actually, like when my dryer broke down, like Love Inc. hooked me up with a new one, where it's like, I just wouldn't expect Christians to do. Totally. You know, you're kind of doing this pre-work to get people's stereotypes broken down. Cause I think a lot of my neighbors, like I'm the only Christian that they know. And so I'm like, that's a weight, you know, to be like, just be real careful with your words and with your actions of like, how am I, to use another Multnomah professor, like, how am I smoking what I'm selling? You know what I mean? Like, how are we putting our faith into practice? And what I just am so amazed by with Love Inc. is, it's about those deeds. It's our faith and our deeds. And but I also don't want to make the whole conversation like a commercial for Love Inc. And I don't really even know that.
As long as you're in Clackamas County.
We just happened to interview you guys together.
Yeah. Well, I think the other part is unique again about Portland specifically, and Christians in Portland. It's not, Christianity is not cultural. Where it might be in other parts of our country where it is the cultural norm to attend church, even if you believe in God or not. Yeah. And so I do see this as you're talking about a breeding ground. I really see it as also a breeding ground for services, but also global missions as well, which I think is fascinating. So when I was abroad, and I shared briefly about this before we started rolling, that when I was abroad, not a majority, but there was a high amount of individuals that were from the Northwest abroad. And all over the place, like from Romania to Dubai, lots of global workers are serving abroad that are
looking for the sun.
Looking for
Dubai.
November,
Romania.
December, January.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Yeah, they're looking for the sun, trying to figure that out. Yeah.
So in Italy, you said you were working with a lot of refugees. So what was that like?
It was incredible. It was really awesome, having the opportunities. And the majority of the refugees that I worked with were Nigerian.
Okay.
And so they had more of their faith was more predicated upon, what's it, what's it called? The gospel, the
Prosperity
gospel. Thank you. And so just really just walking them through the scriptures and giving them just biblical reasoning of how their former understanding of how to read the scriptures and what the Bible is actually saying.
Yeah.
I felt like I was doing most of that type of work, and then just loving them where they were.
Yeah.
And just caring for the guys. So I was kind of not overseeing, but I was working with about 5 different complexes that had an average about 500 individuals in my community that I was working with. So not all of them, because there was a high population of Muslim people there, which was the fun part. So I worked with a small population of Christians, and as they're reading the Bibles, part of the Muslim culture is that your Bible is like the thing that's the most important to them.
Yeah.
So when they're seeing Christians actually reading their Bibles, they started taking interest in Christianity, which is a lot of fun to be able to have that time.
Yeah. So what's going on with in Clackamas County?
Yeah, so for myself, I was born and raised in the Portland area. Grew up I was actually born in OHSU and all that good stuff. And so lived my whole life here, attended high school and elementary, middle school, all that good stuff. Married my high school sweetheart. We've been now married 28 years, 29 in February, which we're pretty excited about.
Yeah.
And we have 2 kids. I have a 21-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And we are just, like you're saying, it's like living the dream right now. I grew up in the church for the most part. I was a youth pastor for about 10, 12 years, something like that. Was ordained back, I think, in 2013, something along those lines. And then the Lord just had this really strong presence and calling in my life to want to attend or need to attend Bible college. And so that's what took us abroad. So we attended Calvary Chapel Bible College in Hungary, in Vita, a little town called Vita, about 300 total people, including the students.
Wow.
So real small town. And so from there, though, the Lord really started drawing into our heart more ministry and mission. Like I was one of the older people, because it was only a few years ago, one of the older students in that Bible college community. And so for me, I was looking for also things to do. Like I can study and I can prepare and I can do all my homework and everything else. So that's when we moved to Italy. We drove from Vita to a little place called Aleggio Castello, which is right next to Milan, about an hour north of Milan, and where we started working with the Assembly of God Church. And he had a large population of refugees from all over the place, but primarily from Nigeria as they were coming over. And got a chance to kind of serve alongside him while I was finishing up my degree, and it was kind of a crazy time. So then we came back stateside, and I worked for a larger church as a mission pastor for about 4.5, 5 years. And then the Lord just really, just in a most beautiful, miraculous way, drew me away from that church experience and into Love Inc., where I really get to see all the things I was reading in my Bible that we ought to be doing as Christians, and we hope to be doing as the larger body of the church, where Love Inc. really does try to move and mobilize that formality of Christians in the community doing the works of service to those who don't even believe.
Yeah.
And so that for me has been such a huge relief, because when I was working at the church, both as the youth pastor and as a mission pastor, the thing that I struggle with the most is the lack of mobility within church membership, church members. And I I understand it, because I'm also a church member. I get it. It can be scary. And so I think the biggest thing that Love Inc. helps provide the church is the how and the what in the doing. And so I think in that space, the pastors of most churches know why we should be serving.
Yeah.
They give the passionate pulpit push, and it's on the TV screens, it's in the bulletin. But a lot of the actual mobility of the church somewhere stops along the way, and Love Inc. really helps clear that drain. So it's one thing I've just really appreciated about it.
Yeah. So Clackamas County. Is, there's 3 counties in sort of the Portland metro area. But for people that are maybe not from here or thinking about moving here, it's kind of a mix. So there's rural, there's urban, there's suburban, there's a little bit of everything.
Right.
So how is Love Inc. serving in that context?
Yeah, so we, the majority of the individuals that we work with, you would consider maybe working poor. people who are employed, who are under maybe they have limited assets, they have limited income, where they maybe have 2 to 3 jobs, something like that.
Yeah.
And so there is a smaller population. It's about 11 to 12% of population that would be kind of under that federal line of poverty, but about a total line of about 42% of individuals within Clackamas County that actually meet this criteria of working poor, and that's around like 170,000 people within Clackamas County. So it's a pretty large demographic of people. And so again, part of Love Inc., what we attempt to do is not to do anything. That is something that we actually strive to do, which is nothing. We really hold more of a philosophy of service and how we help people, and then we mobilize the church. So we help coordinate the works. So like you talk about the individual who received the washer and dryer, or the dryer.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that Love Inc. had their volunteer base go and do that. They actually mobilized a church body to go do that work. That is part of the Love Inc.'s modus operandum, is to help the church get mobilized in the community.
Nice.
Yeah. I really love that, because having been in both the missions world, that's very much outside the church, very much on the fringes, trying to push the edges. And then you have also another foot in the church world, where it is easy to become more just kind of, hey, this is our status quo. These are the people that are here. This is the flock I need to shepherd and care for. And there's a certain kind of teaching and a conservation push to conserve what is here, disciple what's here. And sometimes the missionary people are like out there, come on guys, get over here, and you guys don't get it over here. And they're like two different types of people with two different focuses. And so to have a highly missional, outward focused organization that says, like, we don't do anything. We exist to serve the church, to do their work in mission. Yeah, so I just love that. And I think where there are like parachurch ministries that try to entirely do the work of the church, like certain maybe campus ministries or other groups, where like they won't say they're the church, but you're like, your job description is exactly like the church's job description. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
And so to have a group say, well, yeah, we're not taking over the church's job, but we're going to be a Barnabas and serve and help them do it better. Because honestly, when we're honest, the church doesn't always do mission and evangelism and like gospel hospitality well.
Yeah, and I think the struggle with that is really a lot of times the church takes on the image or the personality a lot of the pastor, and the pastor's called to prepare the people.
Yeah.
That's their calling. Their calling is not necessarily to be out in the community installing washer and dryers. But I think in that space, so if they're mimicking the personality or the personification of the pastor, then all they want to do, maybe congregationally, is to teach or to be in a Bible study or to do other Bible study type methods, where we're really not called. We are called to read our Bibles and study it, but we're not really called to that alone. We're called to do a task and a job as Christians.
So if I was a pastor and I wanted to up my evangelism and like community outreach game, and I came to you guys, like what would you tell me? How would you help me?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you use evangelism is kind of interesting, because Virgil, the founder of Love Inc., uses an analogy or an example of a gentleman who did evangelism well, like for his church. And when he was talking about how he could actually then, Virgil says, you could teach us how to do this. That's kind of what Love Inc. model is, in the sense of it's not being the church. I mean, you are the church because we're all the church. But you as a pastor need to have space to be able to do what you're called to do, preaching, teaching, and such. So the Love Inc. is able to come in and help mobilize to say, hey, look, what are the resources? Because most pastors at churches, I've found, and I was the same way until I started doing work as a professor in community development. I never understood like the language, like use the assets, the resources, the tools that you as a pastor, most of the time the pastors don't realize how much resource they have within their congregation, because missions tends to be so outside focused that we forget that missionally we have to start within, right? To love our neighbor as ourselves says that we have to first have a proper understanding of self-love, that's not sinful or, just rooted in self, but that we're actually loving self to the point that Christ calls us to, so that I know how you need to be loved. And so as a pastor, I would say, look, when you see your congregation, sometimes we forget the needs for one, but we also forget the assets, the actual ability to love our neighbor. And so Love Inc., I think for me, one of the beautiful things is just hoping to talk through it with a pastor to say, here's what, because we're one step removed from it. Because when I was a pastor, it depends on the size of the church too, really, because I was a pastor of a fairly big church, associate pastor, for the discipleship. It was hard sometimes to be mindful of the needs of your congregation all the time. And so to be able to partner with a group that says, oh, by the way, here is what, a church can do. Like, here are your resources. And then here's the broader community. There are these many churches here. So while you might not be able to meet this need of this certain, car maintenance or appliances or just relational needs, people need to have someone to go on a walk with, and to talk with and to be taken. You can't do this, but there are people who can, and there's other churches that can. And so Love Inc., I think, sometimes is a good encouragement for pastors to say, in today's culture, we have, even within the church world, gotten so isolated from one another. We denominate one another, denominational breaking down of the church means that we tend to then separate ourselves because you label yourself based on your denomination. I label myself. And then so unfortunately the doctrine of, loving the other as Christ calls us to gets kind of pushed aside. So I think when a pastor comes to us, we say, hey, look, we can help free up some of that space for you. The not doing is we're not going to step in and do your church work for you, because then it takes away the ability for that person in their congregation to go, oh, when I actually serve someone and I love on them, there's something that happens within me. And it is that the Friends episode that one time had, can you do something good that's not really beneficial for yourself? Like the Christian model should be, but you don't have to. It's not about doing something good and not for the other. Like, when you do it for them, you are doing it for yourself, and you're doing it for the community at large. And so I think as being a part of Love Inc. and being able to partner with another Love Inc. and always reminding ourselves too, because as a pastor, former pastor, it's hard not to step in and go, oh, well, this is what you're supposed to be doing as a church. No. The Lord has got the church where they're supposed to be. That pastor has been called to that flock.
Yeah.
My role is to encourage them to pour into their flock, the teaching, the preaching, but then also to continue to encourage them to have that space to learn how to serve, to learn how to meet the needs of their congregation, their people, but then also to see how you can then meet the needs of those other churches and partner with them. And then it's the fulfillment of Scripture, where the world around, the community around starts to see, wait, they have these labels like we do in culture. They're this or they're this, but they put those labels aside, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, assemblies, and they're working towards the common goal of loving like Christ loved them. And so that's what Love Inc., I think, one of the beautiful things, and I love it because as a former, I guess a former pastor, because I'm not a pastor now, but I guess you're always a pastor, but that was hard. Like to go through the week and prepare messages and the sermons and the teachings and the Sunday school and that kind of stuff, but then also to try to gather the people to encourage them and to have the times for my folks to go out and serve. Love Inc. comes in and helps to kind of gather that together. And so as a pastor, I get to say, dude, look, we get to work together so that your time in your space is even more profound, because then we get to do this, together is really better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the idea of community is about relationships. And I think one of the things that when I was the mission outreach pastor at a church, the thing that was difficult was that I was always trying to get the congregation that was asking me for what can I be doing. It was a lot of times all internal or the events that I was creating from within the church. So it's either it's an event that we're going to do this area over here, or these people over here, or it's something be part of the coffee
Yeah.
ministry. It was all church based.
They need to come to us.
Yeah,
and-
yes, and that how Emmanuel is that. But then that space of like is the phone calls that we get at Love Inc. 78% in Clackamas County, anyway, 78% of those individuals that call us are unchurched. And I would say that's another maybe testament to the Northwest.
Yeah.
Is that people in the Northwest do not look to the church as a resource.
So do those people that are calling you, they view Love Inc. as this is a social service organization that's going to meet some need that I have?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And that's how, I don't know if all the Love Incs across the country is set up that way, but I think Love Inc. in Clackamas County, that's how we're viewed. And I think a lot of it is, so Love Inc., and just for anybody that needs to know, Love Inc. is an acronym, is love in the name of Christ. And so that is our actual name on our,
It's probably good because as I'm talking about it,
blown.
not
they're probably
incorporated.
thinking Love
Yeah.
INK, like
Yeah.
ink,
Yeah.
like you have
Well,
to get ink.
Yeah, a lot of it, and that's where so to answer your point, people call us because they think we're Love Incorporated.
This guy loves Inc. Look at all those tats.
Yeah, I was
he's
gonna
got.
say,
That's why they hired me. They're like,
that's a
oh, well, you
tattoo
do have
parlor.
ink.
Let's put them on the east side. Yeah.
Love Inc.
But I think in that space is that when people see Love Inc., they're thinking that it's a or it's not a church entity. But we do answer the phones, love in the name of Christ, and that begins their confusion and also their transformation. But I think in that space of offering, what we offer the church is the opportunity to help mobilize the individuals within your church. Because what we do is we coordinate the needs from the community and the giftings of people within the church. So everybody, you have mechanics in the church, you have people who can knit in the church, you have people that can unclog a toilet in the church, you have all of these people that have all these different skill sets. And we have all this list of people that are calling us with these needs. And what we do at Love Inc. is we coordinate those events. And the beautiful part is that the celebration for the pastor is he gets to hear about it. He's not actually doing another thing. Yeah. And to me, that, even as a former mission pastor and associate pastor and youth pastor, blah, 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 that is awesome. Is my church is now doing work in the community and I'm reaping the benefits from stories.
Yeah, we're trying to flip the script. 80% of the church is out serving, and 10% are the ones who are just coming on Sundays. Because nowadays it's 10% come. I mean, 10% do the work, and 9% of the people, my percentage
you
is
got
80 and 10.
You were a theology major, not a
I
math
got that
major,
other
right?
10, yeah,
80-20 is usually what we say.
10-20, yeah.
90-10 is
That's
probably.
right, whatever.
90-11.
Exactly.
67% of pastors make up their statistics.
On the spot.
That's what happens when you have no sun and just you need sad lamps. But that's the idea. It's flipping the script so that more of the church is participating in what the church is doing.
Based on what the community needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and so that's why the beautiful thing is what Love Inc. and Clackamas is doing might be a little bit different. There's similarities to what we're doing in East Multnomah County, but there's to be differences because it's based on the area in which you're in. And East Multnomah County has similarities to Clackamas, but there are differences based on the people that live here. And that's the beautiful thing, because just like Jesus, when he came to minister to the folks, he spoke into who they were, where they were at that time. He didn't expect them to be this certain person at this way for me to minister to you. And so the beautiful thing for Love Inc. is that we get to then go into the churches and listen. One of the things that I think we get to do is to remind, like a lot of pastors, like sometimes in your congregation, some of the needs are relational. It's not the need for appliances or for finances even. It's the need of someone. Yeah. It's presence. And so I love that because we get to be creative. A lot of people think, if you go to a one-stop shop, you pick up groceries, you pick up toiletries, you do that. That's cool, but Love Inc. wants it to be relational. Our whole point is, and that's why it goes through the church, because the church is relational. It's a theology of relation, because the God that we worship, Father, Son, and Spirit from all eternity, is relational, and we're created in that image. And so how can we not then? One of the major verses that Virgil liked was the 1 John 3, 18. Let us love, not simply in word, but in word and deed. Let us show our love through our actions. And that's just, it's Christ-like. And again, during these times when we're talking to pastors, I just think it's super cool, because if it's not Christmas time or preparing for Christmas, then we're preparing for Easter, and you get to remind them, look, This is our faith lived out. When we step into one another's lives, yes, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's inconvenient. But isn't that the beauty of being a Christian, is that in our inconveniencing myself for you, I then grow as a person. And I realize then the truth of my beauty when I serve in love on you. And it's a beautiful thing that Christ can, and we get to chance just to remind pastors, because sometimes being a pastor of a church, you are so weighed down, right? Pete, like weighed down. Ashwa, everyone's pastor in here. And it's not like oh, woe is me cry. It is just the reality of you being in a situation where the faith of a Christian is so relational, it creates the need for us to be a part of one another's lives. That's what Jesus wants us to.
Yeah.
But as a pastor who's called into that, that's a heavy burden, because you see the people in front of you. And so to have just someone come and just say, hey, dude, we want to just to sit and partner with you to show, like, give you space for you to do what you're called in, so that we can do what we're called in. And most of like our stuff is relational. Most of the executive directors, when you talk to them at Loving, they're relational people. It's community development. It really is. And it's the beautiful thing is to remind the community of God how relational we're supposed to be and how beautiful it is. It takes time, you know? And so I think that's the thing that we get to offer pastors is, look, let us help you do your calling better by helping to create space for your congregants, you know? And that's the thing that I love, is because as a pastor, it was so hard sometimes to, oh my gosh, how do I create opportunities for them to serve? Knowing that when a Christian serves another person, they actually completely strengthen and grow and bolden their faith. And most of us in America don't think that way. Even though we like to say, as we're Christians, we're communal, oh, we do communion, we're communal. Their community that we like is like very, very limited, and it's self-selected. I like this community at this time, you know. Yeah. Love Inc. says, but Jesus wants us to step into that community mindset all the time and just live out the truth of our faith, you know. And I think that's the thing that I think is super cool about the push to get the church to remember who we are as the church, you know, because that's what, especially the Pacific Northwest, I mean, needs. And that's why it's a beautiful thing here in Portland, because people who are not churched, they know. Here in Portland, they know, though, that one place that you can go to is someone who is affiliated with Christ.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they know who Jesus is.
Well, and they seek you out when there's like, you know, either a cultural crisis or like a personal crisis in their life. They're like, you know, or they might have had it from their youth even. It's like, I've been gone 20, 30, but I know I can go get some help.
Absolutely.
And that's a you know, huge opportunity for us.
Yeah. One of the fun stories we have that's actually active right now, so I'll try and refrain from names, of course, but is that we have a young woman who had called us for, or actually, I'm sorry, she didn't even call us. She was referred to us by Clackamas Housing Authority.
Okay.
For help. And when we got engaged and connected with her, we were able to listen to her. So our interview process for all of our clientele that we work with is about 45 minutes to an hour long, because we're getting to know them at a deeper level, both on the level of what their need is, for sure, because that's why they're calling us. We want to address that, but we're really also seeking, like, how's your emotional state right now? How's your relationship circles? Who are the people that are encouraging right now? Who are the people you need to keep boundaries from right now? And then what's your spiritual state? So we really try and take in focus for the whole person and what their need is. The fun part is well, I'll maybe share the challenge with this person right now. Their challenge was that they have I think the baby's now 8 months old now, is 8-month-old baby and an 8-year-old, in fact, 5 children. The oldest is 8, the youngest is 8 months. And because her partner was not working for a time period, in his shame, he left the family. So she is now trying to figure out life with these 5 children on her own right now. Once she came into our atmosphere, we now have around her 4 different churches that are caring for her, and about 12 individual members of those churches that are caring for her right now. So that is the encompass of the body of Christ serving this one individual, and that's happening all over Clackamas County. That's just one new example that we're talking about right now of that opportunity to be able to serve these individuals. Now, we do have a trajectory that we are looking for her to move into, because we do not want to do a turn her into a dependent of Love Inc. or the churches in that way. So there is training, there's expectations, there's responsibilities and participation that she follows to help her develop herself as an individual in Christ's image, so that we don't create, someone who is a dependent. And that's kind of a tricky part, and that is one thing I think that is important to share. A lot of other agencies, organizations create dependence, and that's a challenge, I think, in our culture as well.
Because Jesus is concerned about how we live. It's not just concerned. I mean, he's concerned. He came to swallow our sin, to take it all on himself. But that's because he was concerned about how we live, right? And so as the church, if we continue just to simply give what the person's need is without then caring for them as a person, we're doing more disservice than anything. And I think sometimes as a person, I know sometimes it's easier when I pull up on the corner to give $5 to the guy on the street and then just go on my way and say, gosh, darn it, Matt, you're a good person, man. That was, but then all the while.
One of the best, actually.
Yeah, one of the best I know. And look, giving money or giving a bag, we used to do this thing for our church where we'd create brown paper bags, and nowadays with recycling and everything, but it would have like just basic water bottle, granola bar, something, and we'd give it. It's not massive, but it's just something. I think though that what sometimes we do as Christians is we do one act and then we pat ourselves on the back and we say, good, I'm good for 2025. And as a pastor, it's hard then when you're up there up front and you're doing your Sunday schools and stuff, not to be talking to the folks as if you're always criticizing them. You're not good enough. You're not doing enough as a Christian.
Yeah.
Love Inc. comes in and says, no, it's not about how much you're doing. It's about let's do it in the most efficient and effective way, which is through the church, right? And it's when Christians love on other people, because guess what? We were all broken at one point to where we didn't know what was going on, and we met Jesus, and we had a group of people around us, that community, loving on us, because while I might have needed money and rent, my deeper need was to know who I was as a person. And it's through the Christian church, it's through the Holy Spirit and the person of Christ that we come to understand our true identity. We could go to the self-help and all that stuff. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this, is because our expectation is the church is meant to be the church. I'm not out there, like Stuart's saying, I'm not out there solving people's problems, right? I'm out there loving on the pastors in the sense because they are called, their body is called to be the love of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing when it's played. And it only happens though when we're in community, because that's when the world will know that the Father sent the Son, when the church is one. Yeah. We're one like that. Four churches some would go, that's crazy. You have four churches working together for what, and she's not a member for any one of them. It's like that. And that's the beautiful thing, because then you start to go, oh yeah, this is what faith is about. It's about living out the truth of what was done on my behalf.
Yeah. Relationships, community. And so maybe it's not just the paper bag, but it's like, I made myself a lunch, I made you a lunch, and I'm going to sit down, because there's a poverty of community. There's a poverty of the spirit. There's a poverty of not remembering that we're made in the image of God. I mean, we, like, those of us that are in church every week, like, forget that. And what about the person that is feeling marginalized, feeling disconnected, feeling forgotten about by family, by community, by friends? But to look in their eyes, to spend time with them, to break bread with them, even if it's simple at a picnic table in a park or whatever, that can be the start of something that's different.
Absolutely. I think that when we're called to develop community. And I think just as a quick little trick, the fastest way to start building a relationship with someone is to ask them their name. It's the first private piece of information that anybody will give you almost willingly. Yeah. But then to repeat it when you see them again, even if it's weeks or months, time of duration between the time, to be able to say someone's name, it's a profound thing when someone communicates your name that you haven't maybe seen for a little while. Yeah. That shows that they have value. Yeah. And it shows them that there is something unique about how you want to interact with them. And I think that is maybe even underserved in our community right now.
So I'm curious to hear what you guys are learning about these communities that you're serving, because you're sitting down for 45-minute intake interviews. You guys have your hand on the pulse of these communities that you serve in. Like, what are some of the more surprising things that you've learned? Where do you think maybe even churches or pastors, maybe that primarily their interaction is maybe with their neighbors, but largely with their congregation, what don't we see in the community? What and then not just needs, but just maybe it's the assets, the strengths, the opportunities, or the dysfunctions. Like what's there that we're not seeing?
Yeah, I mean, and I've known this because since we've been in Portland, my family and the church that we've been at have done stuff with the homeless and the houseless and within that community. And like the time that, and I think most people, once you see this, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But within the homeless, there is community.
Yeah,
like they care about each other.
Yeah.
You know,
kind of watching out for each other.
They totally do. And it's not ways that we would probably watch out for one another, you know, and sometimes it is, you know, it creates more chaos for others who are not, but it's because they're caring for each other. And I had to pause because the way in which we care for one another, I think sometimes as churchgoers, as Christians, we put a structure. This is what it looks like when you care for people. And then when you go and you work with homeless folks and people who have just been discarded, devalued by society, seen as not valuable, and you see, though, that they value each other. I'm like, that can't be taken away. Like Satan, society, the darkness, the evil of this world cannot, no matter how low someone seems in our societal setting, they still are a person and they know it because when they're in their own community, they see each other as people. Yeah. While we see them as having little to no value, the way we treat them and how we take care of them and say the governments, and they themselves though remind us. And when I got in that community and you're sitting there out on the street with folks and watching them interact with each other, I was like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. And that's why for me, I think the need, it's relational. Get Christians in the presence of people who are in need to remind them of how much need they have. Like I did ministry in one of the churches I was a pastor at was in California, and we would go to this area in San Francisco called the Tenderloin, it's a pretty gnarly area. Drugs.
Last time I was walking through there, I was pushing my son up the hill, and you know, they were shouting, "Hey, being a good dad there, good, keep going, buddy." You know, I like that. But it's kind of
crazy. We would do the street ministry stuff, and one time we took our kids to an apartment building. The amount of nakedness that they saw and drugs and stuff, and people thought we were crazy. But it's that because then we would take our church folks there, and they would think, oh, we're doing such good, we're serving them. And I had to remind them, actually, afterwards we talked about it, I said, those folks that allowed us to come into their space, they were gracious. They were giving us the gift of being able to serve. Well, we think serving is something that we do for others. It's actually something that they're allowing us to do because in serving the other, we step into what it means to be created in the image of God, you know, in Christ, because he came to serve. He came to take my sin. And so I think that's the aspect of it, that the beautiful thing is when you get into that and you learn that, you're like, no, there's something very, very distinct and common about each one of us. No matter what the world says, no matter what the society says, that person has this or they're not this or that. When you start serving and you go into there, you're reminded, they're like me.
Yeah.
They need you. Mm-hmm. Just like I need you, we need one another. And so that's been a wonderful thing that I've been constantly reminded of, you know.
Yeah. And to answer your question too, I would say that the thing we keep hearing, and this would be, there's multiple symptoms of it, but it's loneliness.
Oh yeah.
They're alone. And even if they have family, that people don't feel comfortable expressing who they are and their true identity because of rejection or multiple amount of fears. And so when you talk about value, that's probably the one thing. I even mentioned their name. We talked about all these things, but just to allow them to express themselves and in their time of trouble without any judgment or without any recourse or any effect. Again, we are known at Love Inc. for giving material items. So that's the majority of the phone calls we get is like, I need a bed, or I need a piece of furniture or firewood or shoes or whatever it is, that's what people are calling us for, because that's how they initially find out about us. What they find when they call is they find a friend. And we even had one individual, and this happens quite a bit, but this one particular individual, she called and she was upset. She was angry even at my volunteer. She was angry at the whole, she just was very tense. The phone call was very tense. Through our conversation, we found out that she was having a conflict with her daughter-in-law, and which was prohibiting her from seeing her granddaughter. So we, just through conversation, we're interjecting, love and value and like understanding who she might even be. Even we're not using Christianese or Christian language, but we're talking about biblical ethics and biblical moralities from that position. And even though she had called in for, I think it was furniture or something like that initially, towards the end of the phone call, she goes, I don't even know if I want that. I just needed to call. I just needed to talk to somebody. So it wasn't the stuff. So her expression of frustration was being was being drawn out by the frustration within her family. But how she contacted us, she goes, I need stuff. I need to fill this hole. I need to fill this thing. And so I think in that space of like providing value to people, that is what people need right now. And so when we talk about like names, everybody has, and this is a work that we do at Love Inc. Everybody has a name tag. Some of it's based upon what your need is, your poverty, your worthlessness, or your devalued, your lack of dignity, your masculinity, or lack thereof. These are the name tags you might put on yourself when you look in the mirror. And what we at Love Inc. we try to do is we try and strip off each one of those labels that have been given to you over the years until you can find the label that God has given to you, which is my beloved. When we can get down to that space, we know that we've done our job. That is the work that Love Inc., through our philosophy and through the ministry we try and do, by proving that the church has extraordinary beauty within each one of the pastors and within each one of the members within, and that we get to share that beauty with individuals who have never thought about darkening the doorway of a church. We have, and I'll just share one more story. We have this woman who had called. She had been burnt by the church and burnt by the church and burnt by the church over and over again. She's now here in Oregon, in Clackamas County, because of a domestic violence. She was moved out here. So she's calling us because she needs to furnish her apartment now. She goes into this place. All she's got is wall-to-wall carpet. We provide furniture, so she calls us as a resource. And as soon as she found out that we utilize churches as a resource to help, she got livid. And her words were, why would you allow churches to help a person like me? Like, how dare you insert church into my life? Well, it was probably another 45 minutes into that conversation. And what we always do at the end of every phone call is pray for the individual. We ask them if we can, of course. We invite ourselves into prayer. And our worker at the time had asked us several times, can I pray for you? Can I pray for you? And she goes, no, you cannot pray for me. Not pray for me. After a certain amount of time, during that last phone call, she had called back a few times. She goes, because of your care and your treatment of me, I will allow you to pray for me. So as she is now understanding the church in a new light, so part of the beauty towards the end of that meeting is that our worker, she went over, she picked up, she didn't have a car, picked up this individual, drove her out to our furniture warehouse, which is in Canby. The guys there loaded up their own trucks and drove out to her apartment and moved her in to her space. And the tears and the hugs that followed were just something that, quite frankly, my experience within the church, I don't know if we could ever repeat that. And it's for me, it's just like, it's fun. Like it's giggling stuff. Like watching the Lord move this way. I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. I get front row seats to some of the most beautiful church activities. And I do feel selfish because I don't share enough of this. So I'm glad for Jesus in the Northwest, Jesus in the upper left. He's in the Northwest too, but he's definitely in the upper left. But in that space, it's like, I'm so proud of the churches in our community. So proud of our pastors and our church members who want to be engaging the community.
And I think the church, what I've learned too, is the church wants to do it, but it was surprising me because they do it's brilliant. We're going to do it too. We're going to totally nick it from them, but they do a training. The training once a month. And it was baffling to me because I was like, what? And we have to train people to serve. And I think what reminded me, and it's part of the thing about what I'm learning, is that I think we as leaders sometimes forget that folks want to serve, but
They often don't know how.
totally. And you feel like, wait, I'm not doing it right. Like, and also
Yeah.
though you've had maybe like not a good experience because you weren't trained up and mentored before you were put out to serve, so that you reach someone who's angry and then you're just like, forget it. This is
Yeah.
why I don't serve, because no one. But if
They don't appreciate it.
totally no, but that's the thing is
Or
like,
they ask you some hard question that
and
you're
you're
like,
like, I don't want to mess them up, you know. And I think for us, that's why I totally appreciate like the training model too, because we take that seriously. You want to train volunteers, and a lot of times as a pastor of a church, you forget that. You're like, no, just go serve, you know. And so you don't do trainings a lot. And so what I've learned too is like, this is a huge help for churches, is to step in and say, if nothing else, look, we can help you train your folks to teach them what it means to serve one another, because that's something it is hard, because you have to remember who we are created to be, that I am who I am in light of who you are. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King said, I can't be who I ought to be if you aren't who you are. I can have $1 million, but if you are poor, I will never be rich, right? And so that's what stepping in and serving one another reminds us. And it is a good reminder to me that, look, we need to be trained how to love one another. Because the further away we get from the cross, 2,000 years ago, the more we get into the societal muck that's coming about. And that says that you are a hindrance to me. We get to step in and remind pastors, because I needed the reminder too, that no, the church, are the beacon of light. You get to remind people of their value, of their specialness. Like, we all are special. We really are. And that's like a joke sometimes. Oh, you're a special person. It's like, yeah, but I am. And why? Because you're created in the name of this God. You're created in the image of this God who is love. And to me, that's the beautiful thing. And if nothing more than sitting down with pastors and just reminding them of that, and if they don't join our network, that's cool. But it's an encouragement, because I think sometimes as pastors, you just get weighted down. It is a lot, because, gosh, when do we see the change, right? I'm up there and it's like, but there is. It's just, and so learning that, just being reminded that people do want to serve, but sometimes they don't serve because I don't know how. Like, I never took a class on it. Like in college, I don't know if my college didn't teach, this is how you become a servant, And then when I was teaching and we were doing leadership stuff, at one time servant leadership was a good thing. Then now it got, no, we don't want servant leadership. It's too demeaning or whatever. Well, if I'm having to submit myself to you for a Christian, that's an empowering situation. For the world, submission is, that's evil, that's negative. Surrender is not a huge popular concept, but for the Christian, surrender is empowering.
Yeah.
And so I think just being able to remind one another that's a beautiful thing that I've been learning is, I need to be reminded of this. So we get to remind each other when we do the trainings of how to volunteer, how to serve. And so those are the things I think. I love it. I love that the Spirit moves through, and I love that for Love Inc. It's rooted in Christ and through the Spirit, so that we get to talk to the churches how churches should be.
Yeah.
The movement of God is first and foremost. It is about the needs, but it's about the needs of the people and meeting those, because it's about Jesus first. And it's so in the name of Christ is absolutely crucial. And so I love being reminded of that, because I need to learn that every day. I need to be reminded that, no, I am special, because I go through, the days with that whole, the imposter syndrome and wondering, am I doing this right? And especially with Christianity, because it's so profound. What we're saying is we do have the truth. Mm-hmm. And that truth is so saturated in love that people who are offended by it and think that they were hurt by it, I'm like, but you weren't. It was something that paraded around as Christian or love or church, but it wasn't, because it wasn't communal. It wasn't in the name of Christ. And not that they meant to do that or were intentionally doing it, but we just get so busy. We get so quick to do in America that the church forgets sometimes you're supposed to be a space of rest and pause, so that the hope for our lives can just play out in full effect. And so I love learning that every day, being reminded that when I get to speak to a pastor, I get to be someone who encourages them and says, let us help you be who you are called to be and love your people, and we can help you do that more profoundly. You know, and I love learning that on a daily basis. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's powerful. Pete, do you work with Love Inc. and these guys out here as they're getting started?
Yeah, our my church has been real involved with it the last couple of years. It's been a very intentional sort of journey to get to the point where they can hire an executive director like Matt. But yeah, a woman from our church has been the chairwoman and has been involved with it because of a previous experience she had seen. And I've been familiar with it for maybe about 15 years because of where I served previously. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been great because oftentimes I feel like if you're starting a new ministry or you're starting a new initiative, you're starting a new church, whatever, it's like you want it to happen. Most church planters I've been around or ministry leaders, it's like they want it to happen quickly. And sometimes like you jump into the deep end of the pool and you jump right back out. But it seems like there's a lot of structure in place where they've been very like intentional. This step, then this step, then this step, then this step. And hopefully this, the Love Inc. East Multnomah County, decades and decades of ministry in our neighborhood because the opportunities are there and that's what we're called to do as a church. So, yeah.
Amen. Yeah, I like that.
And I feel like there's already a pretty healthy kingdom ecosystem in Rockwood and a lot of collaboration among churches and ministries. And so to have another major partner to jump in there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I hope, through this and just as the church of Portland, the church of Oregon continues to go forward, getting away from the competition.
Yeah.
We don't need to compete with each other. I could be like, oh, well, I'm not going to talk about Stuart because we want people coming up. I would love to do campaigns and fundraise stuff for them because look, in Clack, they are needed, just like we are needed here, just like the church is needed, And so I think this idea that we need to compete to be the only one, that's totally American culture, like to be, that you have to be unique and you have to be like the only one. And so you got to tear down. You tear down. And for Love Inc. and for the church and for Christians, the building up. That's how we make ourselves, known in society. And I think I was reading this article on LinkedIn and one of the upcoming...
Boomer.
Yeah, right? I was reading it's the new Facebook, And,
I was watching this TikTok reel and okay, go ahead.
That's right. I was I was back in Soundscape, SoundCloud or whatever. Netscape. That's right.
On my dial-up.
That's right. I wasn't able to get the whole thing because the dial-up blew out. So
you were reading this MySpace. Go ahead. What were you saying?
On LinkedIn, but one of the because people are communal, but they don't want religion. Yeah. Because the Christians that have a public profile tend to promote a Christianity that's not even Jesus-centered, right? And so this, it was like a agnostic or atheist chaplain. And the job, what do? They help organizations create community.
Yeah.
But they were saying that you could do that apart from Christ. And I just chuckle because I think that that's a common today in our culture. People want to say they can live without
the kingdom
God,
without the king.
But you can't. And people know that. And that's why I think people get upset when they're like, but the church hurt me because I know who this God is, right? I've been told this story about this God. I mean, what God would give their own child for the sake of people who continually turn and, disparage him and demean and all these things, and yet continues to give. So people know who the church is. That's why I think for me, it should be a reminder when people get angry about what the church has done, we go, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to pause and apologize and say, I'm sorry for what I've done to you. But I just met you. But I am the church. And I think Love Inc. and these kind of, when it's rooted in Christ, it's not about just, again, meeting the needs. It's about actually meeting their need. We all think our needs are financial or material, but they're not. It's that relational aspect because we're all alone. The amount of people who won't sit and just rest and meditate because they're like, I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. That's because we're afraid of who we are or who we've become. And so I think the need for today's culture, I mean, Love Inc. for sure, but just for Christians to be reminded, dude, Jesus came, he's real. And he's called me into this place that, it is offensive to this culture. I mean, the amount of times he says, blessed are those who are not offended by my teaching, right? I'm like, so he's calling us into this realm to where if we're too comfortable into this culture, we have to pause. And I think I need to be around Christians who are way centered in Christ, to help challenge me and to encourage me. And so I think for us, when we step into the church, we get to remind people, no, you do have value in the sense that you can serve this person and this person. And when you're doing it, it is beneficial for all of us, for the community, because so much in today's culture says if you haven't done this, you don't have this degree, you don't have this accomplishment, you don't have this, then you're worth nothing. If you're not rich, this money, this car, this whatever. And that's why I like Portland. I like the Pacific Northwest because you step into this area that we're all in right here, and you're like, it is this weird conglomeration of you have super rich material and super rich non-material on the streets, and yet they have their thing and they think that they're rich with culture stuff. And the church has to find that place like Jesus to walk in the margins, right? To walk down the middle of the street and say, I'm not going to take the sidewalk. I'll go in the gutter because that's where the people are that need to be loved. And I like that. It's hard. I can't do it on my own because when I try to do it, I get too irritated. I'm like, geez, if they just would do it Matt Farlow's way, then everything would be. And so I get around guys like you and like, Connie, our chairwoman for our board and stuff. And it's so awesome to be reminded of my own need. And how we step in. So that's what I love about it. That's what I love about like the church doing what we're supposed to do.
And that's where like community development and justice and the gospel kind of all come together. And I love that. I think that's where we have to wrap, but I love that the idea of Jesus in the margins. Is where. So thank you guys so much for being with us, spending this time, and just reminding us of what the Holy Spirit's up to.
Amen. So how does the church leader find you guys? What's the best way to look up? Your work?
I might want to say first that Love Inc. is a national movement. And so if you are encouraged by this and you're outside of our areas that we serve, go to loveinc.org. And what you'll be able to find there is more information about Love Inc. But then also, if there's not a Love Inc. in your community, you can actually start one. So Love Inc. National does not start Love Inc.'s. It is the church.
People started.
It's the churches. So it's 6 churches that come together from different denominations that actually start Love Inc.'s. So without the church, Love Inc. does not actually even exist. So I would encourage you, if you were encouraged by this, what we're sharing, to go to loveinc.org and look up how to start a Love Inc. in your area. For me, in Clackamas County, you can go to clackamasloveinc.org. If you live in Clackamas, you know how to spell that. But clackamasloveinc.org, and all of our information's on there.
Nice.
Yeah, and we're Love Inc. So Inc. INC, EMC. So it's all one word, .org. Or you can email me, Matt Farlow at loveinc.emc.org. And so, it's cool.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you
guys.
And thank you guys for what you guys do. This is
Absolutely.
Awesome. Both as a pastor and ministry that you guys do. It's just, and this podcast is just fantastic. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.